Jennings ready with the bases loaded. Infield back, double play depth. Here's the first pitch, swung on, hit in the air to center. This is deep. Wilson going back, still going back. The ball over his head, it's in the seats. Hee-Seop Choi with the first grand slam of his career. 4-1 Los Angeles.
That was the story last night as the Rockies lost to the LA Dodgers 6-3 on the road, first of a 3-game set. John Beltran and Pat O'Rourke now joined by Major League Baseball expert Ralph Widlic. And, boy, Jason Jennings took a shutout into the fifth or sixth inning, Ralph, but, man, walks just killed him.
8 walks yesterday, guys, and that infield, that double play depth did not help that home run by Hee-Seop Choi at all, did it? I'll tell you, he just rolled through the first 3 innings. He had no problems at all, Jason Jennings. We're speaking of course, rolled through the first 3 innings, 28 pitches after the first 3 innings, looking really good, looking like a repeat of a week ago, complete game against the Dodgers, and kaboom, 8 walks, grand slam by Hee-Seop Choi, as you just mentioned, and this ball game is over, 6-3, and Odell Perez pitched an I shouldn't say an unbelievable game, a fine game. Odell Perez is a good pitcher, and he's 4-1 right now with an ERA of 3.64 after being hit pretty hard by the Rockies last weekend. The man can pitch, and he did a good job against the Rockies, and show's over. I mean, right now the Rockies are sitting there at 6-14 with the worst record in the National League, and only a game away. Actually, Kansas City with only 5 wins, fewer W's on the scale. So Rockies are just one horrible month, and they can't wait until today's game is over to put April in the history books and go on for next month and see what happens in May.
Ralph, I'm annoyed when other people bring it up. I'm going to bring it up myself. I mean, looking at the Rockies in terms of their pitching staff and the excuses everyone makes in terms of these guys being, worn out by Coors Field and pitching in the altitude, guys like Mike Hampton, of course, in the past, but it really makes me wonder when Jason Jennings is walking 8 guys, and he's had problems with his control not only this year but last year as well,
yes,
when he had no prior history of having trouble with his control. I mean, do you feel that Coors Field and that the altitude is having an effect on his arm, and do you feel that that's going to be the case for the Rockies franchise throughout the rest of their existence? I mean, I hate it when people use it as an excuse as why they're not winning, because I think it has more to do with the general manager than it does with the actual team they field every day, but still, it makes me wonder when Jason Jennings, who threw strikes in college and threw strikes the first year at the Rockies and now isn't throwing strikes, it really makes me wonder that maybe it is having an effect on him.
I've got to wonder about that too. I try to fight that argument off as well, and if we can get into some of this a little later on, I want to talk about some of the relief pitchers the Rockies have had over the years, and the success and failures they had. But getting back to Jason Jennings, I mean, you're absolutely right there. 23 walks already this year in 31 innings. You cannot succeed pitching that way. And, again, it was a game on the road yesterday, so there was no Coors Field factor, but that's really not what you're talking about at this point. The fact is that he has no control whatsoever. His location is bad. And if that location is bad simply because of the fact that he struggles so hard to pitch well at altitude at Coors Field, maybe it is taking its toll on him. That could very definitely be a situation, because when you take a look at some of the pitchers who had really, and you can identify the ones with success at Coors Field on one hand, it's an issue where they didn't walk batters, and that's the whole thing. Yes, they gave up the home runs, but they didn't walk batters. But Hampton started to struggle with his control. Darryl Kyle started to struggle with his control, to name two of the big money acquisitions that the Rockies have trotted out to the mound and have failed. And Jennings is struggling with his control right now as well. And you just don't know if, in fact, that is a factor. So it very well could be a situation there. There's no doubt about that. I mean, everything has got to be so finely tuned to pitch effectively at Coors Field that possibly that strain, that stress just carries on to a very bad situation on the road, and as evidenced yesterday by 8 walks. But what concerns me, though, Pat, is if he pitched so successfully the first 3 innings yesterday, only 28 pitches, 5 pitches in the first inning, how in the world does he suddenly lose his control? Is it a lack of basic maturity? And I don't believe that's the case, because I think he is mature. He's been around a long time. Is it a fact that he just loses his location? Or does he lose concentration on the mound? And if it's a matter of concentration being lost on a mound, Apodaca, Hurdle, and whomever the catcher is must get out there and talk to this guy and work with him and get him focused again. And that could be the situation. I hope that's the situation, the lack of concentration and the maturity issue. But if it's anything more than that, if it's a situation that the stress and strain of pitching every 5 days and at Coors Field when you're at home is an issue that will never, ever get resolved. If, in fact, that is the issue. And it's something, obviously, it's concern, and it's something we've got to talk about. And I'm glad you brought that up. And when the Rockies do come in town, I'll corner Apodaca. Maybe not corner him. I'll just get him up against the wall someplace.
Well, they're also, Ralph, pitching under duress on the road. This is the 7th game they played on the road this year out west. And with the exception of one game in San Francisco on that Friday night, they're not getting any of these starting pitchers any run support. And it looked to me, I don't know how you saw it last night against Dallas Perez. I mean, who's preparing these guys at the plate? I know Perez was throwing some very nice pitches, some outstanding pitches, but it looked like the Rockies didn't have a clue. And that wasn't only the case last night. That was the case in Arizona. That was the case in the other 2 games in San Francisco. So I wonder if the Rockies hitters are not even prepared for some of these pitchers they're facing on the road.
Well, I look at the same thing. I look at Dustin Moore, for example. Why in the world did he even start last night? He goes 3 for 4, 3 strikeouts, that is, not 3 hits and 4 at-bats. Luis Gonzalez, 2 strikeouts and 2 at-bats. These guys look like they weren't ready. You're absolutely right. They look like they should have been out there. They were not prepared. Dallas Perez has been in the major leagues now for several years. Luis Gonzalez is only in his 2nd year. Dustin Moore has been in the major leagues for several years. He played with the Giants last year. He knows Dallas Perez, and yet he looked like he was totally overmatched against him. He had no clue as what Dallas Perez was going to do, how he's going to work on him. And every batter knows when he faces a pitcher more than once, when he faces a pitcher over a couple of years, how this pitcher's going to work on him, how he's going to effectively get him out. Does he start him out inside? Does he start him out outside? What kind of a pitch does he throw initially? I mean, they know this. They've got to know this, and the scouts know this. That's why you have your advanced scouts. And you're right. John, you're absolutely right. You hit the nail right on the head, as they say, bud, because at this point in time, the way they looked last night, they were in no shape or form to hit this guy and hit him effectively. And I'll tell you something, guys. We're talking about hitting right now. We're talking about the Rockies. Todd Helton does not look good with a stick in his hand right now, in my opinion. He's down to 264, and when was the last time we saw an average like that this late in the season with a Todd Helton? So something's wrong there, and it's something that's got to be corrected because they cannot afford to have Todd Helton, their big stick in a lineup, batting 264, followed by Preston Wilson at 246, and he's been struggling to get to 246. Todd Helton is going down to 264. Preston Wilson is going up to 246. So we've got some problems right now in the middle of the lineup, and you're not going to score many runs when Helton and Wilson are not hitting the ball.
Yeah, I mean, you need, especially those guys, a hit on the road. I mean, looking at Preston Wilson, I mean, I've heard that obviously rumors that the Rockies would like to move him, and one of the destinations mentioned is Atlanta. But, I mean, what is it going to take for the Rockies to get rid of Preston Wilson? Because obviously they'd love to do it in a heartbeat just to get rid of that contract. But do you feel that Preston Wilson will be moved before the trading deadline at the end of July?
If he's healthy. Pat, if he's healthy. Health is the whole key. If he's healthy, he will be moved. If he's not healthy, nobody wants to take a shot at that $9 million contract plus an outfielder with bad legs who's not healthy. The whole key is his health. And if he starts hitting the ball, that's the funny thing. We want him to start hitting the ball, obviously, because we want Rocky success. But at the same time, if in fact he's not hitting the ball, or if he is hitting the ball, he will be traded. So in a sense, it's a catch-22. But if he does hit the ball, he's going. There's no doubt. You take a look at the Braves. Brian Jordan is starting to hit the ball now. Andrew Jones are both over 200 right now and starting to hit the ball fairly well. The Braves are starting to win some ball games. The Braves still could use a Preston Wilson in that lineup. There's no question about that. And they would insert him probably in right field because nobody's going to take Andrew Jones' place in center field. But he's got to be healthy, and that's the key. That's the key to the Rockies keeping him or trading him. If he's not healthy, he's staying on this ball club. If he's healthy, he's gone.
Okay, we've taken up almost half the time of our allotted time here for our Major League Baseball conversation with the Rockies. John Beltran and Pat O'Rourke, joined by Major League Baseball expert Ralph Widlic. So last night with the featured pitching matchups we talked about yesterday on Preps and More, it was the visiting teams who came out on top. Let's start with the National League. Of course, St. Louis beats Atlanta 6-5, and both Mulder and Hudson struggled in the opening inning. And then a lower scoring game between the Cubs and the Astros with Greg Maddux for the Cubs and Roger Clemens for the Astros. And Maddux, who hadn't pitched pretty well this season, and obviously in the last few Aprils has not gotten off to great starts, was pretty good yesterday, but how much credibility do you attach to yesterday's start for Maddux, Ralph? Because after all, he did it against those very lowly winning Astros.
Willie Tavares in the Astros.
Exactly.
I'll tell you, you're absolutely right, John. I mean, yeah, Maddux pitched well. I mean, but again, look who we faced. You're right. It's almost facing like a minor league team right now. And you've got to wonder what's going through Roger Clemens' head these days. Once again, he gets absolutely no support. I mean, that's ridiculous. 2 runs on 7 hits, and that team cannot manufacture runs. I'm sorry. You talk about a team that could look for Preston Wilson. It could be the Houston Astros, but yeah, Maddux is going to come on. We talked about him yesterday briefly, and he's going to come on. He does pitch pretty poorly in April. Yeah, I think a lot of the success yesterday was the fact he was facing pretty much a minor league lineup, but still 7 hits, 2 runs, 1 walk. Nothing wrong with that. It's a pretty typical Greg Maddux performance, but let's see how he does against a team that with bats in their hands the next outing, John.
Well, looking at the Astros, I mean, obviously they spent too much time worrying about Carlos Beltran in the offseason because they didn't address that lineup really at all with his absence. I mean, Lance Berkman is supposed to be back here in the next few weeks. I mean, do you see him coming back at the beginning of next week? I mean, where do you see Lance Berkman coming back? Obviously, he's going to be the savior of all their problems, but they need another bat in the lineup. Jeff Bagwell looks like he's on the down. I mean, well, we know he's on the downside of his career, but he looks like he's especially on the downside of his career, considering he hasn't hit the ball at all this year. I mean, Craig Biggio has done okay, but they really need another bat in that lineup, and Lance Berkman may at least help them a little bit so that Roger Clemens might actually get a victory one of these days.
Well, you take a look at this team, forget the Killer Bees, their history. There's no question about that. What concerns me, Pat, is obviously the fact that Berkman, I mean, are they going to force Berkman back before he's ready? What a major mistake that would be. But you know they want him to get ready as quickly as possible. He's in A-ball right now rehabbing. He's going to go up to AA to rehab. And I don't think he's going to stop at AAA. I think he's going to go right on to the Houston Astros. But I think my opinion was initially when they talked about the surgery and the stories we heard that my opinion was he'd be back the 1st of June. Quite obviously he's going to be back before then. He may be back by the end of next week. Let's just pick out a date, May 10th, May 12th, something like that. I think you're going to see him pretty much as in the lineup to stay as long as he stays healthy. But you talk about a team needing a bat. Boy, do they need this bat. They need him so desperately, and let's just hope they don't rush him back. But this team is, at this point in time, 8-13 on a record. I mean, they look pathetic. They look absolutely pathetic at the plate. They look even worse than the New York Yankees. When we get to the American League, we've got to talk about them.
Yeah, but let's stick with the National League because Pat, before we went on air, was very impressed by Felipe Alou, who brought in his closer, Brett Tomko, in the first inning yesterday against the Pittsburgh Pirates, so he did an outstanding job. But, of course, we were talking about it
was a great move.
Yeah, an outstanding move. And I want to ask a theoretical question here, Ralph. St. Louis and Atlanta, the Cardinals this year have still not allowed a run in the 9th inning, something that astonished me as I was watching that game last night. But knowing that Jason Isringhausen is out, are you a believer more in the bullpen by committee as a temporary solution until your closer comes back, or should you extend your starters that much more?
Well, in this situation, let's talk about the Cardinals because that's a team. Tavares got a save the other day. Yesterday's the first pitcher out of the bullpen. King we know is a specialist, but King has closed on occasion. Al Reyes has closed on occasion. You take a look at this team. This team the bullpens consist of pitchers who have closed on occasion. So when you talk about closer by committee, this team, yes, I can see the Cardinals being successful with a closer by committee simply because all these pitchers have closed on occasion throughout their major league careers. So I would say the St. Louis Cardinals are one of the very few teams around that can get away with it. But getting back to the starting rotation, sure. When you get 7 innings out of a pitcher, you can pretty much dictate how you're going to work those next 2 innings as long as your team is still ahead. There's no doubt about that. And I think you're going to see some of the Cardinal pitchers who are healthy, and that's the issue. Morris and Carpenter are coming off of injury. So I don't think you're going to see extended innings and pitches by Morris, but I think you're going to see some probably an extra inning or 2 tacked on to Carpenter. I don't think there's any question about that. And I think that's what we're going to see the way the Cardinals are going to address this issue until Isringhausen returns.
Well, let's go over to the American League. I mean, it was a great performance by your boy Doc Halladay last night. I mean, the shutout the Yankees looking at Roy Halladay, pardon, but looking at Roy Halladay, he's had 2 bad starts. I mean, he had the bad start against Boston early in the year, although it wasn't a terrible start, but he did pitch, I think, 6 or 7 innings and gave up 5 runs. And then he had another bad start in his last performance against Baltimore. Do you feel Roy Halladay is back to his Cy Young form from 2 years ago after a start he had last night against the Yankees, or does it remain to be seen because he has had those 2 poor outings?
Yeah, I think he's back. I think he's very definitely back. His curveball, we saw the highlights last night, was breaking just absolutely phenomenally. I thought it was everything that he had 2 years ago. I think Roy Halladay is very definitely back, and I certainly think while the Yankees are in a batting funk, I think Halladay still was one of the major reasons last night. Well, anytime you can go 9 innings, 3 hits, 1 walk, and 9 strikeouts against a decent Yankee lineup, they're not hitting the ball as well as they could and should, but still, Halladay looks like he's every bit as good a pitcher today as he was when he won a Cy Young Award 2 years ago.
Yeah, Ralph, but when you look at a pitcher who's on a mediocre to below average team, you wonder how marketable he is. Would you be surprised if Roy Halladay was with another team come the trade deadline?
I think I would be surprised. I think Toronto is struggling to put people in the seats, fannies in the seats, as everybody likes to say. And I think Halladay, you trade Roy Halladay away. I really believe that you're sending a message to the people in Toronto that you're looking for something other than success on the field, because you're talking about basically money. You're talking about contracts, and I just don't look at that. I don't think that's a positive step. I don't think Toronto is going to take that step. They could get an awful lot for Halladay, no doubt about that. But this team, I think, must keep some of their aces around, whether they're beyond the field, and I'm talking about Vernon Wells, or beyond the pitching staff like a Roy Halladay. I think you need that, and I think that's what you're going to see. I think you're going to stay.
Well, let's stick with another team that has no chance of winning the American League East, the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. I mean, Lou Piniella, of course, suspended yesterday for his role in the altercation, but looking at this Devil Rays team, and I'm really starting to wonder, he thought he was going to take this team to the promised land, or at least a 500 record when he first went to Tampa. But looking at the overall franchise since he's been there, I'm wondering whether he's really hurting this franchise overall, because you look at the guys that take part in the everyday lineup in Tampa Bay, guys like Chris Singleton, Alex Sanchez. There's a ton of players out there. I think Charles Johnson, the former Rocky. There's a lot of veterans that play every day for Tampa Bay, and I'm wondering, when are they going to begin the youth movement? Because we know they don't have a chance of winning the American League East. We know they don't have a chance of finishing 500, yet they still keep throwing out these veterans day in and day out. Eventually, you got to start playing the young guys and trying to develop the young players, because from what I hear, Tampa Bay's got a pretty good minor league system, but we don't know about because those guys are still in the minor leagues.
A very good point. You're absolutely right. I've got to believe a lot of that is based upon Piniella's desire to win, and to win in a hurry, to win now, and they're not succeeding. He doesn't want to take the chance that the Rockies management seems to be taking right now, obviously with less success than we would like. But I think it's a situation where I think Piniella, whether it be his ego or whether his desire to leave with some sort of a decent team on the field, he's going with the veterans, and the veterans are just not producing. And they do have a decent minor league system. They've got some nice young talent. Bring these kids up and give them a shot, Pat. You're absolutely right. Carl Crawford cannot do this whole thing by himself. He's a leadoff man. He can't carry this team on his back. Julio Lugo is not the oldest guy in the league, but Julio Lugo's been around a little bit, but he's a decent shortstop. Aubrey Huff is all right. I would stop right there, basically, and start looking at the minor league system and see what I can provide at these other positions, because it's just not working. Yeah, they picked up a Green from Atlanta in a trade, and Green looks like a nice young ball player at second base. But that's something I think they're going to have to do. I think they're going to have to look at this, say, where can we go? Let's bring some of these kids up. Hey, God knows, finishing in the major leagues, especially in the American League, at the bottom of the league every year, you're getting yourself some pretty good draft choices in the free agency draft. And they've got some nice young kids in the minor leagues. Bring these kids up, let them develop. Piniella's got one more year to go in his contract, guys. He's out of there in 2006. He may be out of there before then, seriously, because, again, he's got all the money in the world. He doesn't need the bucks anymore. And I think this team is wearing on him. I think what has happened the other day with the Red Sox, with the verbal comments he's directed towards Curt Schilling, I think this is an issue. I think Piniella may very well be pretty much on his way out. He may opt for a retirement situation right now and bring the kids up, and it'll be a good time. Send Lou packing, bring the kids up, start afresh. I think that's a good idea, and I think that's something that they should be working on.
Okay, we got about 5 minutes to go on this segment, Ralph. Another team that's under 500 in the American League is the Cleveland Indians. We thought they'd be a little bit better. Are they underachieving, or is the bottom line, as far as you're concerned, they're just not that good?
Well, I think they're underachieving. We talked about that very briefly yesterday, the fact that Victor Martinez and Travis Hafner had not been hitting the ball very well. They combined last night for a total of 5 hits. They hit the ball well last night, obviously. CC Sabathia comes in his first start after signing a big contract. He goes on, pitches a very nice game, solid game. I think this team is for real. I think they're going to play well. I think they just got off to a slow start. By any stretch of the imagination, they're not out of anything. They're sitting there 6.5 games out of first at the end of April, but the White Sox are coming back to the pack. They lost 3 in a row. Minnesota's starting to heat up. They've won 4 in a row. Detroit's a decent team. I think they're 500 or slightly better. But I think Cleveland's going to start moving, and I think they're a better ball club, guys.
I mean, I don't mean to be so harsh, but let's move to the American League Central, and the Kansas City Royals simply suck. I mean, let's face it. I mean, I don't care if they're a small market team. There are plenty of other small market teams, but this team has been. Well, I don't even want to say it, but I mean, they've been dog poop pretty much for the last couple of years.
No, they've been dog poop for the last probably 18 to 19
I know,
years.
a couple of years.
2 seasons.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
It. Maybe 2 seasons in the last 18 years.
And, right. I mean, somehow our Bears seems to keep his job there. And Tony Pena, who I don't blame for this because obviously he doesn't have anybody to go to. Right. I mean, you look at Mike Sweeney, he's the really only serviceable major league player they have in their starting lineup day in and day out. I'm just wondering, what kind of pictures, I mean, we talked about this before with Scott Doman, but what kind of pictures Howard Barrett has of his owner to keep his job this long? Because obviously he's not developing any kind of talent at Kansas City at all.
They have nothing. They have nothing in the farm system right now. Zach Greinke is a plus, a plum. He is a kid who's going to be around. He probably is going to suffer the same fate that Halladay has, staying with a losing Toronto team. Greinke's going to stick with a losing Kansas City team. The kid has talent. He's one of the very few out there. You're right, a very bad franchise. Barrett has got to go. Barrett has got to go. I think Pena will probably follow suit and finally get a job with a decent team with a chance to win, because I think Tony Pena could be a good manager in the major leagues. But Alan Barrett, I mean, it's a joke. It truly is. He has done nothing on his club. Last year he goes out and signs a Juan Gonzalez. Now, if that is not the dumbest thing in the world, I mean, it's got to be awfully close to it, guys. That was a mistake, a major mistake. Juan Gonzalez doesn't want to play baseball anymore. All these injuries are basically just a cover-up to live the good lifestyle. He doesn't want to play Major League Baseball. He's not healthy. He doesn't want to be healthy. He doesn't work to be healthy. And Alan Baird goes ahead and gives him a ton of bucks last year. Baird has got to go. Kansas City has got no place to go but up. But unfortunately, they're going to find the cellar. But they're in the cellar. But they're going to find the very depths of the cellar before they start moving forward.
Okay, Ralph, we're almost into the month of May. In fact, tomorrow begins the month of May, and you know, Major League Baseball has not come out with a player who has tested positive for steroids. So I'm sick of it. I'm coming out with a list. Well, no, that we care about. That we care about. So I'm coming up with a list. I'm coming up with a list of those, okay, and this is just off the top of my head, and you guys are better at this than I am, that have to add to this list. It's a very, very brief list so far of guys who are definitely not on steroids, okay? I got in the National League, I got Jose Vizcaíno, Juan Pierre, and stop me if you believe any of these guys could be on steroids. Luis Castillo, Tim Hudson, Ryan Madson, Greg Maddux, Pedro Martinez, and Jeff Francis. I only have 4 guys in the American League: Ichiro, Jamie Moyer, Steve Finley, and Juan Uribe.
He was working all night on that list.
Yeah. I got 8. Oh, by the way, I'm going to add Omar Vizquel in the National League. There's no way he can be on steroids. Ralph, I mean, this is just a few days after the NFL testified before Congress, and nobody's going to believe the steroid policy is worth anything until somebody legitimate gets tested positive. I mean, you can't tell me that Major League Baseball...
John, are you asking for volunteers? Are you asking for some Major League to step forward and say, you know, it's looking so bad, guys, I think I'll put my head in the loop. I'll put my head in the noose. Give me a couple extra bucks. I'll test positive.
Okay,
I mean, that's not going to happen.
No. Okay, we got about a minute and a half.
What about Byung-Hyun Kim?
Oh, there's another one. That's a good one.
Byung-Hyun.
I'm adding. Right. No, I agree.
Maybe he should be on steroids.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me ask you this, Ralph. Okay. Is Major League Baseball hiding something, or are players actually behaving this well?
First of all, everybody hasn't been tested yet. We know they're going to come out. There's no doubt about that. I mean, they were dumb enough to take it. They're dumb enough to continue to take it. I think there's screens out there. I think the screens are probably in effect. I think they've been shielding some of these guys who have already been tested. But we are definitely going to get some people out there, guys. And if it reaches a point where they're going to ask for volunteers, they probably will. I mean, you're right. It is a joke. And you talk about 4 major leaguers, and I love Pat's comment. 4 major leaguers. Yeah, right. But anyway, yeah, we're gonna get a volunteer or two out there, and we're gonna see it happen. But you're right. I love the guys you picked up, the stick figures, the Gumbies. You picked the Gumbies out there. But how about Brian Roberts? Is Brian Roberts on steroids? We got to figure that one out. That could be the question for the week.
Yeah, he's not on the non-steroid list, that's for sure. He could be on steroids. Anyway, for Major League Baseball expert Ralph Widlic and Pat O'Rourke, I'm John Beltran. Brush Baseball this afternoon in Eaton starting at 1 o'clock right here on 1010 KSRR.